Get out of this house tonight, Thandeka. You are the embarrassment this family can no longer hide. If that's truly how you see me, I'll leave.
Official legal notice for the registered occupants of this property. Oh, this villa legally belongs to Thandeka?
Beaded gown. Thandeka slowly lifted the suitcase at her feet, her cobalt shwe suit still immaculate, and looked around the marble room she had designed and paid for. I will leave, she said calmly, but before you host another celebration here, read the ownership agreement. By sunrise, one sealed legal notice would expose who truly owned every luxurious wall around them. Thandeka Malongo guided her pearl-white sedan through the bronze gates of the family villa in Waterkloof, Pretoria. The sunset rested behind the jacaranda-covered hills, spreading a copper glow across the glass balconies and pale stone walls she had once sketched on tracing paper. She had spent years designing magnificent homes for wealthy clients, yet this was the only one whose every corner carried a private memory. She had paid for it. Thandeka stepped from the car wearing a tailored cobalt blue suit trimmed with golden shwe fabric along the sleeves. Her braided hair was gathered into a low bun, and the copper bracelet that had belonged to her late father rested against her wrist. In one hand, she carried her leather work bag. In the other was a small ivory box containing a handcrafted cake for her youngest sister, Lindiwe. That afternoon, Imbali Habitat Studio had secured its largest hospitality contract yet, the redesign of a luxury hotel overlooking the Magaliesberg Mountains. Her staff had opened sparkling grape juice and insisted she remain for a celebration, but Thandeka had left early. Lindiwe's family introduction was approaching. Family came first. The moment Thandeka entered the villa, she was surrounded by the scent of fresh proteas, polished wood, and expensive perfume. Event workers moved across the marble floor carrying coral-colored fabric, gold candle holders, and crystal vases. A floral arch had been erected near the staircase, while soft jazz played through hidden speakers. The house looked breathtaking. It also looked unfamiliar. Please do not place those flowers there, Lindiwe called from the living room. That wall will be used for photographs, and I need the background to look clean. She stood beside the fireplace in a fitted gold dress, directing 3 decorators while holding a tablet against her chest. Her long hair fell over one shoulder in glossy waves. She looked every inch the successful event designer her social media followers believed her to be. Nomvula Molongo sat on the cream sofa wearing an emerald dress and a matching head wrap folded into precise layers. Gold bracelets circled both wrists. Beside her, Zanel reviewed a sitting chart while dressed in a burgundy jumpsuit with beaded earrings. Thandeka waited for someone to notice. No one did. I brought something for you, she finally said. Lindiwe glanced at the cake box. Put it in the kitchen, please. The refrigerator near the dining room is already full. There was no hug and no question about Thandeka's day. She carried the box into the kitchen. When she returned, Nomvula had placed a cream folder on the coffee table. You are late, her mother said. I came directly from a contract meeting. Nomvula's expression softened briefly. Did it go well? We secured the project. That is good. Her mother immediately pushed the folder toward her. Then this should not be difficult for you. Thandeka remained standing as she opened it. Inside was a list of unpaid wedding expenses, custom decor, imported glassware, private security, catering for 286 guests, and accommodation for members of Kagiso's extended family. At the bottom, a handwritten figure had been circled twice, 2,480,000 rand. Thandeka looked up slowly. What exactly am I reading? A temporary guarantee, Lindiwe replied. The suppliers need reassurance before they release the final materials. A guarantee from the family. Thandeka turned another page. The document identified the Waterkloof Villa as security supporting Lindiwe Luke's experiences. Beneath it was a blank line prepared for Thandeka's signature as Director of Mahlori Residential Assets. Her chest tightened. This property cannot be used as security. Lindiwe crossed her arms. Nobody is taking the house. It is paperwork. Paperwork creates obligations. You always speak as though we are strangers asking for charity. I am speaking as the legal owner of the company named in this agreement. The decorators continued working. but more quietly now. Nomvula lifted her chin. Your sister is about to join a respected family. This ceremony must show that the Molongos are not people who struggle publicly. There is no shame in adjusting a celebration to what we can afford. Lindiwe laughed without humor. Easy for you to say. You have never had to impress a future husband's family. The words landed more sharply than their volume suggested. Zane looked down at the seating chart. Thandeka closed the folder. I will not sign this. Nomvula's bracelets struck together as she leaned forward. After everything this family has done to support your career? Thandeka stared at her mother. 11 years earlier, she had used nearly every rand from her first major project to purchase this villa after the family's former home was lost to debt. She had never asked them to repay her. She had only asked that the property never be borrowed against. That condition had been clear. Lindiwe snatched the folder from Thandeka's hands. You treat money as though it makes you wiser than everyone. But a woman can own offices, companies, and buildings, and still fail to build a family of her own. The room became painfully still. Thandeka reached for her work bag, preparing to leave the argument before anger spoke for her. As she turned, a loose page slipped from the folder and landed near her shoe. She bent to pick it up. It was a supplier declaration bearing the villa's address, the name of her holding company, and a digital signature that appeared to be hers. Thandeka had never signed it. She looked at Lindiwe, then at Nomvula. Neither woman appeared surprised. Something inside her grew quiet. For the first time that evening, Thandeka understood that her family was not waiting for her permission. They had already used her name. Thandeka stood inside the glass-walled conference room of Imbali Habitat Studio, watching Pretoria's pale winter sunlight spread across the polished concrete floor. Behind her, a wall of material samples displayed copper mesh, hand-woven grass panels, carved timber, and bright shwe fabrics selected for the company's latest hotel project. The studio was alive with quiet movement, yet the document lying on the table made everything around her feel strangely distant. Her name was printed at the bottom. Thandeka wore a cream-tailored jumpsuit with cobalt beadwork along the collar, but the elegance of her appearance could not hide the tension in her shoulders. She had slept badly after leaving the Waterkloof villa, replaying Lindiwe's words until they lost their sharpness and became something heavier. Being mocked for remaining unmarried had hurt, but seeing her signature on a financial document she had never approved had disturbed her more. Themba Khumalo entered carrying 2 cups of rooibos tea and a slim black laptop. His dark green suit was softened by a patterned pocket square, and his usual calm expression disappeared the moment he saw the paper spread across the table. You said this came from the wedding folder? It fell out while Lindiwe was arguing with me, and nobody tried to take it back. They did not realize I had seen the signature. Themba placed the tea beside her and sat down. As finance director of Imbali Habitat Studio, he had spent 8 years reviewing contracts, tracing irregular payments, and stopping Thandeka from accepting projects simply because she felt sorry for the client. He respected her generosity, but he understood its cost better than most people did. He scanned the document twice. This is not only a supplier declaration, he said. It confirms that Mallory residential assets will cover our unpaid obligations connected to Lindiwe Lux experiences. I know the listed exposure is 2,480,000 rand. I know that too. Themba looked at her carefully. Then why are you speaking as if this is only a family disagreement? Thandeka turned toward the window. Below them, cars moved along the Menlin roads while office towers reflected the bright morning sky. She had built her company slowly, first from a rented desk, then from a narrow studio above a furniture shop, and finally inside this carefully designed space. Nothing had arrived easily. I need to know how far she went before I react, Thandeka said. If I send accusations without understanding everything, my mother will say I am trying to destroy Lindiwe's wedding. And if you remain silent, she may lose her suppliers. That is not what I asked. Thandeka lowered her eyes. Themba opened the laptop and entered the reference number printed at the top of the declaration. Within minutes, 3 related documents appeared in an encrypted folder sent by one of the event suppliers. Each carried the Waterkloof address. Each referred to the villa as an asset belonging to the Mahlongo family. One contained Thandeka's digital signature. The second included her professional registration number. The third carried an old copy of a municipal account issued to Maholori Residential Assets. Thandeka's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Where would Lindiwe get this account? You gave your mother copies of the household records last year, Demba reminded her. You wanted her to understand the maintenance expenses. I gave her those documents because she asked me to trust her. Demba did not answer. The Stellans did. Thandeka picked up her phone and called Advocate Refilwe Dlamini. She explained the situation without exaggeration, describing the supplier declaration, the digital signature, and the use of the property to address. Refilwe listened without interrupting, then asked Thandeka to send every page immediately. Do not contact the suppliers yet, Refilwe said, and do not confront your sister until I confirm whether these documents have already created legal reliance. What does that mean? It means someone may have delivered goods or extended credit because they believed your company stood behind the agreement. Thandeka's stomach tightened. She ended the call and returned to the conference table. Zemba had arranged the documents in chronological order. The earliest had been issued 6 weeks before Lindiwe ever mentioned needing a guarantee. They did not prepare this last night, he said. No, they have been using your name for weeks. Thandeka stared at the dates. During those same weeks, Nomvula had called her repeatedly about flowers, catering, guest accommodation, and ceremonial clothing. Lindiwe had sent photographs of dresses and table settings, asking which colors looked more expensive. Neither had once mentioned the guarantee. They had offered her details. They had hidden the truth. Her phone rang again. Refilwe's name appeared on the screen. I found something more serious, the lawyer said. The file includes part of the family's residential agreement. Whoever submitted it removed the final page. Thandeka knew what that page contained. It named Mallory Residential Assets as the sole owner of the villa. It also prohibited Nomvul, Lindiwe, and Zanele from using the property for loans, guarantees, or commercial commitments. Can you tell who sent it? Thandeka asked. Not yet. But the supplier recorded the sender as an authorized family representative. Themba watched her face as she listened. What do you want me to do? Refilwe asked. Thandeka looked again at the forged signature. Her first instinct was still to protect Lindiwe from public embarrassment, postpone the dispute, and repair the damage privately, as she had done many times before. But something had changed. Prepare a formal review, she said. Do not send it yet. When the call ended, Themba closed the laptop. You are giving them another chance. I am giving myself time to act without anger. There is a difference. I know. Thandeka gathered the documents and placed them inside a blue leather folder. Before she closed it, she noticed a handwritten note on the final supplier page. It contained only 6 words. Owner approval confirmed by Mrs. Mahalongo. Not Lindiwe, her mother. The Waterkloof villa glowed beneath hundreds of suspended lights as the Molefi family arrived for the formal introduction ceremony. Black luxury vehicles moved slowly through the bronze gates, their polished surfaces reflecting coral drapery, white proteas, and the purple blossoms of jacaranda trees beyond the walls. A marimba ensemble played near the garden terrace, while elegantly dressed guests crossed the stone courtyard carrying wrapped gifts and ceremonial baskets. Everything looked flawless. Nomvula Malongo stood at the entrance wearing a wine-red gown embroidered with gold thread and a towering matching head wrap. Her bracelets chimed as she welcomed Kagiso's parents with warm embraces, carefully naming every relative and praising the long friendship between their families. Beside her, Lindiwe appeared radiant in a fitted turmeric gold dress covered with delicate beadwork that caught the afternoon light. Thandeka watched from the foot of the staircase. She had chosen a deep cobalt gown with structured shoulders and geometric shweshwe panels running along the waist. The design was elegant rather than extravagant, created by a young Pretoria designer whose first studio Thandeka had helped finance. Her braids were swept into a polished crown, and her father's copper bracelet rested against her wrist. Nomvula looked at her and frowned. That dress is too commanding, she said quietly. Today belongs to Lindy Way. I am not trying to compete with her, then change into something softer. Thandeka studied her mother's face. There were guests nearby, including two women from Kagiso's family who pretended not to be listening while arranging their handbags on a console table. I came to welcome our guests, Thandeka replied, not to disappear. Nomvula's smile remained fixed for the people watching. Please do not make everything difficult. Before Thandeka could answer, Lindiwe approached and took her arm. Come with me. She guided Thandeka toward a smaller dining alcove beside the kitchen, where 6 chairs had been arranged near the service entrance. 2 photographer's assistants, the sound technician, and a florist were already seated there. Thandeka looked at the place card bearing her name. You placed me at the staff table. It is not the staff table, Lindiwe whispered. It is simply closer to the kitchen. The family table has 12 seats. Kagiso's relatives filled the remaining places. There is an empty chair beside Zanelli. Lindiwe exhaled sharply. Why must you challenge every decision today? Thandeka glanced through the open doors toward the main terrace. Zanelli sat beside Nomvula in a burgundy silk dress, smiling politely as guests admired the floral arrangements. No one met Thandeka's eyes. I thought I was part of this family, Thandeka said. You are. But you do not enjoy these ceremonies, and you always look uncomfortable when people ask about your personal life. My personal life is not a reason to place me beside the catering entrance. Lindiwe's expression hardened. Kagiso's relatives are traditional. They will ask why you are 36 and unmarried. I do not need awkward conversations during my introduction. There it was. Not concern, shame. Thandeka had spent years believing her family's comments about marriage came from worry. Standing beside the service door in the house she had purchased, she finally understood that they did not merely wish she had a husband. They believed her unmarried life reduced the image they wanted to present. She removed the place card from the table and slipped it into her handbag. I will stand, she said. The formal introductions began on the terrace. Nomvula spoke proudly about Zanelli's position at a private bank and described Lindiwe as a visionary entrepreneur whose company was transforming luxury events across Gauteng. Guests applauded while Lindiwe lowered her eyes with rehearsed humility. Then Kagiso's aunt, Dr. Nandi Molefe, looked around the terrace. I was told there are 3 Molongo daughters, she said. Where is the eldest? Nomvula hesitated only briefly. Thandeka prefers working quietly behind the scenes, she replied. She helps us with decorations and improvements around the house. A few guests nodded, accepting the explanation. Thandeka stood near the glass doors, holding a tray she had taken from an overwhelmed server. The weight of it suddenly felt heavier. Before she could step away, a man in a cream linen suit rose from the Molefi family's table. Thandeka Mlongo? Her asked. She recognized him as Sibusiso Maseko, a hotel developer who had attended the presentation at Imbali Habitat Studio. He crossed the terrace with an astonished smile. I did not realize this was your family home. We approved your Magalisburg hotel concept yesterday. Your team's work was extraordinary. The conversations around them softened. Sibusiso turned toward the guests. This woman designed one of the most ambitious hospitality renovations our group has commissioned in years. Dr. Nandi's eyebrows lifted. You are the founder of Imbali Habitat Studio? Thandeka placed the tray on a nearby table. Yes. And you designed this villa? Every room. Nomvula's smile tightened. Lindiwe stood motionless beneath floral arch while several guests began asking Thandeka about her projects, her company, and the modern Debele influences visible throughout the house. For several minutes, the woman her family had hidden near the inn. Their kitchen became the most respected person on the terrace. Thandeka did not celebrate their discomfort. She only answered honestly. Kagiso approached after the applause faded. His midnight blue suit was sharply tailored, but concern had replaced the easy warmth in his expression. My family received the property insurance schedule this morning, he said quietly. I thought the villa belonged to your mother. It belongs to Mallory Residential Assets. Kagiso stared at her. Is that not your company? Before Thandeka could answer, Lindiwe appeared between them. Kagiso, the elders are waiting for us. He did not move. Why? He asked, looking directly at Thandeka. Is your company listed as the legal owner of the house my family was told belongs to the Malongos? Across the terrace, Nomvula stopped speaking. The music continued. But the celebration had theory changed. The final black sedan disappeared beyond the bronze gates of the Waterkloof villa, leaving crushed jacaranda petals scattered across the driveway. Inside, the candles still burned beside half-empty glasses. The floral arch remained bright beneath the chandeliers, and the expensive room carried the stale sweetness of perfume, roasted spices, and words nobody could take back. The celebration had ended beautifully for the guests. For the family, it had only begun. Thandeka stood near the marble fireplace with her cobalt gown falling in clean lines around her body. She had removed her earrings, but her father's copper bracelet remained on her wrist. Across the room, Lindiwe pulled pins from her hair with trembling fingers while Nomfula sat upright on the cream sofa, still wearing her wine-red head wrap as though the ceremony had not truly ended. Zanel remained beside the dining table. Kagiso had left with his family, after quietly telling Lindiwe that they would speak later. His expression had not been angry. That had frightened her more. Who submitted my company documents? Thandeka asked. Her voice was calm enough to make Lindiwe turn sharply. Nomvula lifted one hand. Not tonight. Yes, tonight. We have spent the entire day hosting important people, and someone spent 6 weeks using my name. Lindiwe dropped the last hairpin onto the table. I used the address because it is our family home. Stop making it sound criminal. You included my company, my registration number, and a signature I never gave you. It was a temporary confirmation. It was false. Nomvula rose from the sofa, her bracelets sliding toward her elbows. Your sister needed suppliers to trust her. You have influence, Thandeka. You could have helped without turning this into a public scandal. I did not create the scandal. You embarrassed her in front of the Molofes. Kagiso asked a direct question, and you answered her like a lawyer instead of a sister. Thandeka looked at her mother for several seconds. She remembered the first night Nomvula had slept in the villa, walking slowly from room to room and touching the walls as though she could not believe the family had escaped death. Thandeka had been 25 then, exhausted and proud, believing safety would make them kinder to one another. She had mistaken comfort for gratitude. Did you authorize the document? Thandeka asked. Nomvula did not answer immediately. Lindiwe stepped forward. Mama only confirmed that the house belonged to the family. It does not. The words changed the room. Nomvula's face hardened. Do not speak as though we are tenants begging for shelter. You signed a residential agreement. I am your mother. That does not make the property yours. Lindiwe laughed bitterly. There, that is who you really are. You count every favor, every room, every payment, and then wait for the day you can remind us. I have never asked anyone here to repay me. No, you prefer something better. You prefer obedience. Thandeka's eyes narrowed. You forged my approval. I borrowed your credibility. You risked my company for my future. The last word echoed against the high ceiling. Zanelli finally moved. Lindiwe, lower your voice. No, Lindiwe snapped. She has spent years acting superior because she owns a design firm and understands contracts. Tonight was supposed to be about me, but she stood in the middle of my ceremony collecting praise from Kagaizo's relatives. I was placed beside the kitchen because you always make people uncomfortable. Thandeka stared at her. Lindiwe's breathing grew uneven, but she continued. You are 36, unmarried, and always working. Kagiso's family came to see warmth, tradition, and unity. Instead, they saw a woman correcting her own mother over property documents. Thandeka felt the old wound beneath the insult, but she did not allow it to decide her response. A husband would not make a false document true. Nomvula stepped between them. Enough. For one brief moment, Thandeka hoped the command was meant for Lindiwe. Then her mother taught her. You have become the embarrassment this family can no longer explain. Zanelli looked up. Thandeka did not move. Nomvula continued, her voice lower now. You enter every room carrying your achievements like armor. You refuse to understand sacrifice unless it is yours. You could save your sister's business with one signature, yet you would rather expose her. I would rather she tell the truth. Truth without mercy is cruelty, and mercy without accountability becomes permission. The room fell silent. Lindiwe folded her arms. Justin signed the guarantee. We can correct the documents after the wedding. No. The answer was quiet. Final. Nomvula pointed toward the staircase. Then pack your things and leave this house tonight. Zanele inhaled sharply. Mama, do not interfere. Thandika looked at the woman who had once cried when she received the villa keys. She looked at Lindiwe, still dressed in gold, and at Zanele, whose silence had protected everyone except the person being wrong. No one withdrew the order. Thandika walked upstairs to the private room she used when work kept her in Pretoria. She placed 2 dresses, a laptop, and a small leather folder into a charcoal suitcase. There were other belongings in the cupboards, but she took only what mattered. When she returned, Nomvula stood near the front doors. Thandika set a sealed envelope on the marble console. I will leave, she said, but before you host another celebration here, read the ownership agreement. Lindiwe rolled her eyes. You are trying to frighten us. No, Thandeka lifted the suitcase. I am giving you one final chance to understand what you have done. She walked through the bronze doors without looking back. Behind her, the villa remained luminous, magnificent, and silent. On the console table, the envelope waited. Inside was the page they had removed. Thandeka Malongo sat across from Advocate Refilwe Dlamini, inside a private meeting room overlooking central Pretoria. Morning light passed through the tall windows and settled across the walnut table, illuminating 3 carefully arranged folders, a silver fountain pen, and the sealed envelope Thandeka had left at the villa. The room smelled faintly of polished leather and a strong Ethiopian coffee, Refilwe kept for difficult conversations. There would be no shouting here. Thandeka wore a structured ivory dress with a narrow band of blue shwewe fabric running from her shoulder to her waist. Her braids had been reitied into a smooth, low bun, although exhaustion remained visible beneath her eyes. She had spent the night in a self-faced apartment near Menlyn, staring at unfamiliar walls and wondering how a house she legally owned had become the one place where she felt least welcome. Refilwe opened the first folder. I reviewed the title records, the company documents, the residential agreement, and every supplier declaration you sent me, she said. The ownership position is clear. Mallory Residential Assets purchased the Waterkloof property 11 years ago, and you are the sole director and beneficial owner of that company. Thandika nodded. My family knows that. They know enough to understand they cannot use the property as security. Refilwe removed the final page of the residential agreement and placed it between them. Nomvula's signature appeared beneath a clause prohibiting commercial guarantees, loans, transfers, and any representation that the residents owned the property. Lindiwe and Zanele had signed separate acknowledgements 4 years later. The evidence was simple. The betrayal was not. Can my mother order me out of the house? Thandeka asked. Not in any legal sense. You are not occupying the villa as her guest. You entered as the representative of the owning company and as the person who granted her the right to live there. Then can I order them out? Refilwe leaned back slightly. Not tonight, not through force, and not because you are angry. The agreement gives them residential rights subject to specific conditions. A violation allows you to begin a formal process, but it still requires notices, an opportunity to correct the breach, and a reasonable transition. Thandeka looked through the window toward the city. Part of her had wanted the answer to be easier. She imagined Nomvula standing in the marble entrance hall while officials explained that the woman she had expelled was the only person with authority over the property. She imagined Lindiwe discovering that beautiful clothing, influential guests, and carefully edited photographs could not transform borrowed security into ownership. The images brought no peace. I do not want them on the street, Thandeka said. I know. I also cannot pretend this did not happen. You should not. Refilwe opened a second folder. You have 3 responsible options. First, allow the existing arrangement to continue but issue a formal warning and prohibit further access to company documents. Second, terminate the residential agreement and provide sufficient time for relocation. Third, offer them a defined period to correct the violations under stricter conditions. What would correction require? Full disclosure of every document submitted in your name, written withdrawal of all false representations, repayment of legal costs, and confirmation from every supplier that your company carries no liability. Thandeka folded her hands, and Lindiwe's debts? They remain hers unless you choose to assume them. I will not. The answer came more easily than she expected. Refiwi studied her face. That is not cruelty. I know what it is legally. I am not speaking only as your lawyer. Thandeka lowered her gaze to her father's copper bracelet. She remembered how often she had solved problems before anyone else felt their consequences. When Zanele had fallen behind on university accommodation, Thandeka had paid without mentioning it again. When Nomvula's medical insurance had lapsed, she had restored it before her mother knew. When Lindiwe's first event lost money, Thandeka had covered the staff wages to protect her reputation. Each rescue had seemed loving at the time. Together, they had taught her family that consequences always stopped at Thandeka's door. Refilwe slid another document across the table. This arrived from Kanisa Premier Events shortly before you came. Thandeka read the supplier's notice. Materials worth 684,000 rand had already been released, based on the guarantee carrying her digital signature. A second payment was overdue, and the supplier was preparing to pursue both Lindy Luck's experiences and Mallory residential assets. They relied on the false approval, Thandeka said. Yes. If I remain silent, my company could be drawn into the claim. Yes. And if I formally deny it, Lindiwe's business may collapse. Refiwi did not soften the truth. Her business may already be collapsing. Thandeka rose and walked toward the window. Below, people crossed the pavement carrying briefcases, shopping bags, and cups of coffee, each moving inside a life she could not see. For years, she had believed family loyalty meant standing between the people she loved and every painful result of their choices. Now she saw the danger in that belief. Protection without limits could become participation. Prepare the notice, she said. Refilwe reached for her pen. Termination? Not yet. Give them 45 days to correct every violation. No new commitments, no access to company records, and no further use of the villa in Lindiwe's business. And the suppliers? Send a formal denial of my signature and invite them to submit complete records. I will not accept liability for a document I never signed. Refilwe began making notes. Thandeka returned to her chair. Her decision did not triumphant. It felt like removing a heavy piece of furniture from a room and discovering how deeply it had marked the floor. Her phone vibrated. A message from Zanel appeared. Mama opened the envelope. Lindiwe says you are bluffing. She has invited the suppliers to the villa this evening to prove the family still controls the property. Thandeka read it twice. Refilwe looked up. What happened? Thandeka placed the phone on the table. They are about to create another violation. Refilwe closed the folder. No, she said quietly. They are about to document it. Thandeka entered a private dining room on the upper floor of the Golagano Grand Hotel in Pretoria. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights stretched across the darkening horizon, while brass lamps cast a warm glow over a table set with crystal glasses, white orchids, and hand-painted ceramic plates. The elegance of the room could not soften the tension waiting inside it. Everyone was already there. Kagiso Molefe sat at the head of the table in a midnight blue suit, his posture composed but distant. Lindiwe occupied the chair beside him, wearing a coral silk dress and gold earrings that moved whenever she turned toward the door. Nomvula sat opposite them in deep purple velvet, while Zanele wore a tailored emerald jacket over a black dress. Advocate Refilwe Dlamini sat beside an empty chair reserved for Thandeka. Lindiwe's expression changed when she noticed the lawyer. What is she doing here? She is here because your suppliers relied on documents connected to my company, Thandeka replied. She wore a copper-colored dress with structured shoulders and a narrow panel of blue shwe fabric along the waist. Her appearance was polished, but there was no triumph in her face as she took her seat. Kagiso placed one hand over a dark folder. I requested this meeting, he said, not to humiliate anyone, but because I will not enter a marriage without understanding what has been hidden from me. Nomvula lifted her chin. Financial matters inside our family should not become entertainment for outsiders. I am not an outsider when your daughter is preparing to become my wife. Lindiwe reached toward him. Kagiso, I already explained that the supplier issue is temporary. You explained that your family owned the Waterkloof Villa and that it supported your business. It is our family home. That is not what I asked. Silence settled over the table. Refilwe opened her folder and placed 3 documents in front of Kagiso. She spoke without accusation, explaining that the villa belonged to Malore Residential Assets, that Thandeka was the company's sole director, and that the family's residential agreement specifically prohibited the property from being used as security. Kagiso read every page. Lindiwe watched his face. Thandeka did not. The signature on this guarantee, Kagiso said, is it yours? No, Thandeka answered. Did you authorize anyone to sign for you? No. Did you agree to cover Lindiwe Luck's experiences if he failed to pay its suppliers? No. Each answer seemed to remove another piece from the life Lindiwe had presented to him. Nomvula leaned forward. Thandeka could solve this tonight. She has the resources, and the wedding contracts are already in place. Thandeka turned toward her mother. My ability to pay does not make the debt mine. You speak as though Lindiwe is a stranger. I am speaking as though she is an adult. Lindiwe's eyes flashed. You have wanted this moment from the beginning. What moment? The moment everyone sees you as the responsible one and me as a failure. Thandeka's voice remained quiet. I wanted you to tell Kagiso the truth, for he had to discover it from legal documents. Kagiso closed the folder. How much does your company owe? Lindiwe looked toward Nomvula before answering, just over 1 million rand. Refilwe shifted a second statement across the table. The confirmed exposure is 1,736,400 rand, excluding penalties and 2 disputed invoices. Kagiso's face tightened. You told me the business had no outstanding debt. I expected the wedding revenue to clear it. Our wedding was part of your recovery plan. Lindiwe's composure began to crack. The publicity would have attracted clients. The Molefi name would have opened doors. The truth was no longer hidden behind decorations. Kagiso sat back. So my family was not only joining yours. We were being used to strengthen your company. That is not fair. Neither was lying to me. Nomvula struck the table lightly with her palm. Enough. Many businesses use credit. Lindiwe was protecting her future by placing Thandeka's company at risk, Zanelli said. Every face turned toward her. Zanelli's hands were clasped tightly, but she continued. I saw the first supplier email 3 weeks ago. I knew they believed Thandeka had approved the guarantee. Thandeka stared at her sister. Why did you say nothing? Zane's eyes are lowered. Mama said you would eventually sign. She said telling you too soon would only create resistance. The admission hurt more because it was spoken without anger. Nomvula looked betrayed. Zanele, no mama. We keep saying Thandeka exposed us, but we use her name before asking her. We made the decision first and expected her love to clean it afterward. No one answered. Kagaso turned to Lindiwe. The wedding will not proceed as planned. Lindiwe went pale. Are you ending our engagement? I am postponing the ceremony until every debt, contract, and financial obligation is disclosed. I will not punish you for struggling, but I will not marry a version of you built from omissions. Tears gathered in Lindiwe's eyes. She looked at Thandeka. Are you satisfied? No, Thandeka said. There is nothing satisfying about watching someone you love face consequences you try to help them avoid. Nomvula shook her head. Do not pretend innocence. You brought a lawyer to a family dinner because the family matter had already reached my company. Lindiwe pushed back her chair. Mama told me to use the villa, she said suddenly. She said, the Molefis needed to believe we owned something worthy of their respect. She said you had rescued us before and would do it again. Nomvula's face lost its color. The room became still. Thandeka looked at her mother, finally understanding that the forged guarantee had not begun with Lindiwe's desperation alone. It had begun with Nomvula's fear. And that fear had made her willing to sacrifice one daughter's integrity to preserve another daughter's image. A uniformed courier pressed the bell beside the bronze gates of the Waterkloof villa. The afternoon sun reflected from the glass balconies, but the floral decorations from Lindiwe's introduction ceremony were gone, leaving faint marks on the pale soapstone where hooks and ribbons had been removed. Inside, the house felt larger than it had during the celebration. It also felt colder. Nomvula Malongo opened the front door wearing a flowing sapphire blue kaftan embroidered with silver thread. Her gold earrings were still in place, and her head wrap was folded with its usual precision, but the confidence that had once filled her posture had begun to weaken. She accepted the thick envelope without greeting the courier and signed the delivery receipt with a hand that trembled only once. Zanelli stood behind her. Lindiwe remained in the living room, dressed in a coral blouse and cream trousers, staring at her phone as suppliers sent message after message demanding payment, clarification, or confirmation that the Waterkloof villa could still support her obligations. Nomvula carried the envelope to the marble dining table. The official notice contained no insults and no accusations. It stated that the residents had violated the property agreement by misrepresenting ownership, using company information without permission, and connecting the villa to commercial guarantees. They had 45 days to withdraw every false representation, provide complete financial records, repay the legal cost caused by the violation, and sign revised conditions for remaining in the home. Failure would begin the termination process. Lindiwe read the first page and threw it onto the table. She would not remove us. Zenele continued reading. This is not a bluff. She wants to frighten Mama. No, Zanele said. She wants us to correct what we did. Nomvula stood beside the window overlooking the garden. Your sister has allowed strangers to threaten her own mother. She gave us 45 days. She should have come here herself. We threw her out. The words hung between them. Nomvula turned sharply. I did not throw her into the street. Thandeka has apartments, hotels, friends, and enough money to stay anywhere she chooses. That does not change what happened. Lindiwe rose from the sofa. Are you defending her now because Kagiso postponed the wedding? I am admitting that we used something that did not belong to us. This house belongs to the family. Zanele lifted the final page of the residential agreement. No, we were allowed to live here. The distinction sounded cruel only because they had ignored the aid for so long. Lindiwe grabbed her handbag and walked toward the staircase, declaring that she needed to speak with the supplier before they cancelled another contract. Her heels struck the marble with hurried, uneven sounds. When her bedroom door closed upstairs, the villa returned to silence. Nomvula remained near the window. Zanelli opened a cabinet in the study and removed a grey archive box containing old household records. She placed electricity statements, maintenance invoices, insurance schedules, and renovation receipts across the dining table. Every major payment carried the name of Malori Residential Assets or Thandeka Malongo. Roof repairs, 318,700 rand. Garden restoration, 86,450 rand. Security upgrades, 194,200 rand. Nomvula touched none of them. There are 11 years of records, Zane said. Thandeka paid for everything. I know she paid. Then why did we behave as though she was merely helping? Nomvula's face tightened, because a daughter does not count what she gives her mother. But a mother should remember. Zeni's voice was not loud, yet it reached every corner of the room. She left the documents on the table and walked upstairs, giving Nomvula the privacy that pride rarely permitted her to request. Her own, Nomvula moved through the villa slowly. She passed the living room where she had called Thandeka an embarrassment, the alcove where her eldest daughter had been assigned a seat near the service entrance, and the staircase Thandeka had redesigned so sunlight could reach the center of the house. Every beautiful detail carried her daughter's judgment, patience, and labor. In Thandeka's room, the wardrobes were partly empty. A bottle of perfume remained on the dressing table beside a sketchbook filled with drawings of chairs, doorways, and women standing confidently inside open spaces. The bed had been made before Thandeka left. Nomvula sat on its edge. For years, she had told herself that Thandeka needed less because she possessed more. Lindiwe required encouragement. Zanella required direction. Nomvula required security. Thandeka, strong and successful, appeared to require nothing. It had been convenient to believe. On the lower shelf of the wardrobe, Nomvula noticed a narrow wooden box. Inside lay photographs from the family's earlier years, including one taken outside the small rented house they had occupied after losing their previous property. Behind the photograph was a folded letter written in Thandeka's handwriting. Nomvula opened it. The letter had been written on the day Mallory Residential Assets purchased the Waterkloof Villa. Thandeka described the house not as proof of wealth, but as a place where none of them would have to fear another eviction notice. She wrote that she wanted her mother to sleep without listening for creditors at the gate and her sisters to invite friends home without shame. The final lines were shorter. I hope this house gives us safety without making us forget humility. I hope we never use its beauty to make another person feel small. Nomvula read the words again. Her head wrap suddenly felt heavy. She removed it, placed it beside her, and sat beneath the quiet afternoon light with her gray hair uncovered. For the first time, she understood that Thandeka had not threatened the family's home. They had threatened what the home was meant to represent. At the bottom of the wooden box lay one additional document, a preliminary design proposal prepared by Mbali Habitat Studio. Its title read, Waterkloof Women's Financial and Career Center. Nomvula stared at the drawing of the villa's unused eastern wing, transformed into classrooms and counseling rooms. Thandeka had planned to share the house again, just not in the way they expected. Nomvula Malongo entered the new exhibition hall of Mbali Habitat Studio, carrying nothing but a small leather handbag. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating sculpted wooden screens, copper light fixtures, and brilliant panels of red, turquoise, and yellow inspired by Ndebele geometry. Architects, fabric specialists, and young designers moved between unfinished displays, preparing the space for its opening the following week. Nomvula had never visited before. She wore a simple teal dress with 3/4 sleeves and a narrow gold belt. Her gray hair was visible beneath a modest head wrap, unlike the towering ceremonial styles she usually chose when entering important rooms. There were no heavy bracelets around her wrists and no relatives beside her to make the conversation easier. Thandeka stood near a scale model of the Magalisburg Hotel, discussing lighting samples with Demba Humalo. She wore a tailored saffron suit over a white silk blouse, with her father's copper bracelet resting against one sleeve. When she saw her mother, her expression changed, but she did not rush forward. Themba quietly excused himself. Nomvula approached the model and studied its carved facade. This is the project everyone praised at Lindiwe's ceremony? Yes, it is beautiful. Thank you. The politeness between them felt more painful than anger. Thandeka gestured toward a private consultation room, enclosed by patterned glass. Inside, 2 rust-colored chairs faced each other across a low table decorated with a bowl of dried protea flowers. Nomvula sat down and placed her handbag beside her feet. She did not remove any documents. She did not ask for a signature. I found your letter, she said. Thandeka's fingers paused near the copper bracelet. The one in my room? The one you wrote when you bought the villa? I never intended to leave it there. Perhaps you did not intend for me to read it until I was ready. Thandeka said nothing. Nomvula drew a slow breath. I spent years telling myself that because you were strong, you needed less tenderness. When Lindiwe struggled, I protected her. When Zanele hesitated, I guided her. When you succeeded, I assumed success was enough company for you. Her voice remained steady, but her hands tightened in her lap. I made your strength an excuse. Thandeka looked through the patterned glass at her staff working outside. She had imagined many versions of this conversation. In some, her mother defended everything. In others, Nomvula cried until Thandeka became responsible for comforting her. This apology was quieter. That made it harder to dismiss. You called me an embarrassment, Thandeka said. Nomvula closed her eyes briefly. Yes, You told me I had failed because I was not married. Yes, you allowed Lindiwe to use my name because you believed I would repair the damage afterward. Yes, each admission came without explanation, without escape. Nomvula opened her eyes. I was afraid the Mole fees would see where we came from. I believed the villa, the ceremony, and Lindiwe's business could prove that our difficult years were behind us. I became so desperate to protect an image of success that I treated the daughter who created our security as though she threatened it. Thandeka felt no sudden relief, only recognition. My home was never supposed to be evidence that we were better than anyone, she said. I know that now. Do you? Nomvola accepted the question. I sat in your room after reading the notice. I looked at every invoice Zanele placed on the table. I remembered how often I praised the house in front of guests, without once naming the woman who paid for it. A worker passed outside carrying a vivid blue panel, briefly filling the glass wall with color. I am not here to ask you to cancel the notice, Nomvula continued. I signed the revised conditions Advocate Dlamini sent. I also wrote to the suppliers confirming that I had no authority to represent the property. Thandeka's face remained guarded. And Lindiwe? She has agreed to sell her vehicle and cancel the larger wedding contracts. Whether Kagiso remains is for them to decide. That is not enough to resolve the debt. No, but it is the beginning of her paying it herself. The words mattered. Nomvola reached into her handbag and removed a small silver key. She placed it on the table. What is that? Thandeka asked. The key to the document cabinet in the villa study. I should never have given Lindiwe access to it. I will not keep it again unless you decide otherwise. Thandeka looked at the key without touching it. I cannot return to the way things were, she said. I did not come to ask for that. An apology does not restore trust. I know. I need time. I know that too. For the first time, Nomvula's voice trembled. I only ask for the opportunity to behave differently while you decide what relationship is still possible. Thandeka leaned back. Her mother had spent years entering rooms with demands hidden inside affection. Today she had arrived without a list, a debt, or a family emergency. That absence was small. It was also new. The consultation room door opened gently and Zanele stepped inside, wearing a plum-colored dress beneath a cream blazer. Lindiwe followed in a mustard blouse and dark tailored trousers without the jewelry or polished confidence that usually surrounded her. I asked them to wait outside, Nomvula said. But what they say must come from them. Zanele sat beside her mother. I knew enough to stop what was happening, and I chose comfort instead. I am sorry. Lindiwe remained standing. Her eyes were swollen, but her voice was clear. I sold the car this morning. The payment will cover the supplier deposit and part of the legal costs. I have enrolled in a 6-month financial management program, and I am reducing the company to 3 permanent employees. Thandeka studied her sister. Are you doing this because Kagiso postponed the wedding? At first, yes, Lindiwe admitted. Now I am doing it because I saw how quickly a business built on appearances can collapse. She placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a signed statement withdrawing every false claim connected to the villa. Thandeka read it slowly. I am not ready to forgive everything, she said. Lindiwe nodded. Then do not pretend. No one asked Thandeka to rescue them. No one accused her of cruelty. The room held something the family had rarely allowed before, consequences without performance. Thandeka placed the signed statement beside the silver key. The 45-day notice remains, she said. If every condition is fulfilled, Mama may continue living in the Western Wing under a new agreement. The rest of the house will no longer function as a family status symbol. Nomvula's eyes moved toward her. What will it become? Thandeka looked through the glass at a large architectural plan mounted across the exhibition wall. I am turning the Eastern Wing into a financial and career center for women. Lindiwe stared at her. You would open the villa to strangers? To women who have spent their lives supporting others without learning how to protect themselves. Thandeka stood. The house would remain hers, but its purpose was about to belong to many more women. Warm sunlight poured through the eastern windows of the waterkloof villa, turning the copper screens along the corridor into patterns of gold. The rooms that had once displayed imported furniture and untouched decorations were now filled with curved wooden desks, bright shui cushions, bookshelves, and framed artwork created by women from across Gauteng. Outside, white proteas surrounded a new bronze sign bearing the words Imbali Women's Foundation. The house still looked luxurious. Its purpose had changed. 1 year had passed since Nomvula ordered Tandeka to leave with a suitcase. Now, more than 80 guests moved through the villa for the Foundation's first anniversary gathering, dressed in shades of cobalt, saffron, emerald, coral, and plum. Some were lawyers and business owners. Others were women returning to school, rebuilding after divorce, leaving unstable employment, or learning to separate family obligations from personal debt. Every woman had arrived carrying a different story. Thandeka stood near the former formal dining room, which had been converted into a financial education center. She wore a deep red tailored dress with geometric gold embroidery along one shoulder. Her braids were gathered into an elegant crown, and her father's copper bracelet remained at her wrist. On the wall behind her hung a simple framed sentence: "Generosity should create dignity, not dependence." The foundation had begun with 3 monthly workshops. It now offered contract reading sessions, career counseling, small business budgeting, and evening classes for women returning to education after years of supporting other people. Nothing was given without structure. No one was shamed for needing help. A woman named Palesa approached Tandeka holding a blue folder against her chest. At 41, she had spent nearly 2 decades working in her brother's transport company without a formal title or ownership share. The foundation's legal clinic had helped her negotiate a written employment agreement and begin a bookkeeping qualification. "I received my first certificate today," Celeste said. Thandeka smiled. "You earned it. My family says the agreement has made me difficult. Has it?" Palisa considered the question. "No, it has made me clear." Thandeka squeezed her hand gently. Across the room, Zanele led a workshop on personal guarantees and joint debt. She wore a cream suit over a purple blouse and spoke without the polished distance she once used at the private bank. She had become one of the foundation's most dependable volunteers, teaching women to read every page before signing documents presented by relatives. Her own lesson had not been wasted. Lindiwe stood near the garden entrance wearing a sunflower yellow dress of her own design. Lindiwe Luck's experiences had survived, but it was smaller now. She employed 4 permanent staff members, accepted fewer contracts, and refused to book events without secured deposits. The luxurious vehicle was gone. So was the performance of effortless success. Kagiso joined her near the doorway, carrying 2 cups of sparkling ribos. Their wedding had eventually taken place in a modest garden ceremony attended by 62 guests. There had been no imported glassware, celebrity musicians, or social media campaign. There had been honest vows. Marriage had not erased what Lindiwe had done. It had required her to face it before building anything new. Nomvula moved between the guests in a turquoise gown and a simple matching head wrap. She no longer introduced herself as the owner of the villa. When visitors praised the building, she told them that Thandeka had designed and purchased it, then explained what foundation now offered. At first, those words had tasted like humiliation. Later, they became gratitude. Nomvula still lived in the Western Wing under a revised residential agreement. She contributed a fixed amount toward household expenses and managed the foundation's community kitchen twice each month. Her relationship with Thandeka had not returned to its old shape because its old shape had depended on Thandeka giving and Nomvula expecting. They were building something more honest. Slowly, Themba Kumalo entered from the courtyard wearing a charcoal suit with a copper-patterned tie. He found Thandeka near the staircase and handed her a small glass of sparkling grape juice. "You have been thanked 27 times," he said. "You should allow yourself to enjoy at least one of them." "I was counting the chairs." "Of course you were. 2 are missing from the career room. The delivery team brought them 10 minutes ago." Thandeka looked toward the corridor. "You checked?" "I know you." There was affection in his voice, but no ownership. Their relationship had developed without rescue, secrecy, or urgency. Demba did not treat marriage as the final proof of Thandeka's worth, and Thandeka no longer confused being needed with being loved. They had spoken about a future together, but neither used the conversation to fill an emptiness created by other people's judgment. They chose one another calmly. That mattered. The guests gathered in the former living room, the same room where Nomvula had once called Thandeka an embarrassment. The marble fireplace remained, but the cream sofas had been replaced by movable chairs arranged in an open circle. No seat stood above another. Nomvula stepped forward first. A year ago, she said, I believe this house proved that our family had escaped shame. I did not understand that a beautiful house can become another kind of poverty when the people inside it lose gratitude, honesty, and respect. She turned towards Sandeka. My daughter did not take this home away from us. She gave it a purpose we were too proud to imagine. There was no dramatic applause at first, only silence. Then Zanele began clapping. Lindiwe joined her. Soon the room filled with a warm, steady sound that did not feel like celebration of wealth, victory, or punishment. It sounded like recognition. Thandika walked to the center of the circle. She did not describe herself as a victim, and she did not turn her family's mistakes into a public performance. Instead, she thanked the volunteers, mentors, and women who had trusted the foundation with their unfinished lives. This home was built to create safety, she said. For a while, we confused safety with appearance. Today, I hope every woman who enters understands that security begins when her name, labor, choices, and boundaries are treated with respect. She stopped there. The evening continued with music, shared food, and conversations that stretched through the glowing rooms. Later, Thandeka stood alone near the front doors and watched women leave carrying folders, business plans, and enrollment forms. A year earlier, she had crossed the same threshold with one suitcase. She had believed she was leaving a home. Now she understood. A home was not the places where people demanded that she become smaller to remain welcome. It was the place where dignity could enter without asking permission. Thandeka touched the copper bracelet on her wrist and looked back at the circle of empty chairs waiting for the next group of women. There would always be a seat for them, but no one would be required to surrender herself to earn it. 2 years after the Imbali Women's Foundation opened its doors, the Waterkloof Villa no longer felt like a monument to wealth. It had become a living place filled with voices, plans, and second chances. More than 430 women had completed financials workshops, 78 had returned to school, and 31 had registered businesses under their own names. Lintiwi's company finally cleared its debts and earned a reputation for honest contracts rather than extravagant promises. Zanez was promoted at the bank after creating a program that taught female clients how to recognize risky guarantees. Nomvola continued working in the community kitchen, where she learned to listen without correcting every story she heard. Thandeka's relationship with her family remained imperfect, but it was real. They no longer used forgiveness as permission to repeat old behavior. They asked before entering her office, borrowing her name, or making decisions involving her property. Respect became visible in small actions. One quiet evening, Themba proposed to Thandeka beneath the jacaranda trees outside the villa. She accepted not because marriage completed her, but because he had loved her without asking her to become smaller. Their wedding was elegant, intimate, and joyful. As music filled the garden, Thandeka looked toward the illuminated foundation rooms. The home that had once rejected her now helped other women reclaim their names. That was the happiest ending of all. Thandeka's story reminds me that generosity becomes dangerous when it is expected rather than appreciated. Helping family can be an expression of love, but love should never require someone to surrender her identity, financial security, or right to speak honestly. A person may have the ability to solve every problem around her, yet that does not mean every problem belongs to her. What moved me most was that Thandeka did not choose revenge. She protected her property, refused false responsibility, and allowed her family to face consequences. At the same time, she did not close her heart completely. She created new boundaries and watched whether their behavior changed. To me, that is a mature form of forgiveness. It does not erase the past or restore access immediately. It leaves room for healing without abandoning self-respect. The story also shows that marriage, wealth, and public appearance cannot determine a woman's value. Thandika was already complete before Demba proposed. Her work, dignity, and choices mattered with or without a husband. Sometimes the most loving decision is not another rescue. It is allowing people to carry the weight of their own choices. What would you have done in Thandeka's position? Would you have allowed the family to remain in the villa or asked them to leave permanently? Share your opinion in the comments. Tell us which city you are watching from. And subscribe for more meaningful African stories about dignity, truth, justice, and healing.